Welcome to the Josh Button Podcast, where we discuss health, wellness, and outliers from society. Back to the Josh Button Podcast. Today is part 2 with Dr. Montana, excuse me. And we didn't cover a lot of the stuff that you actually work on last time. We had a good conversation and went from, water and all kinds of different things that, came up. But I really wanted to get into epigenetics because we touched on it and it's fascinated me, especially the last few years. I still think there's a lot of, what's the word for it? People that are ignoring it and possibly not putting attention onto the importance of what we're learning. So give me a good rundown on what we've learned recently about epigenetics and why it's important.
I'll just give you an overview background on what it really is. And I think that's going to give everybody really the most that they need. Everybody thinks that their genetic code is set in stone and that's what they have. That's what's going to direct their entire life. And that's absolutely not true. Every gene has the potential of 30,000 different expressions. That's insane. I ran into that many years ago with the Lyme disease, in that every germ that's out there has 30,000 potential different strains in that species. That's all the genetics. And epi is what's around that makes it express itself. So if we take something like the MTHF, where people can't make active folate, so you can change the parameters of their nutrition so that even though they don't have that gene, they make it and you don't need to supplement it anymore. And we see that all of the time. So you look at the parameters that actually change gene expression, it's mind-blowing how broad they are. Nutrition is way, way, way up there on the top of the list because the quality of what we eat says everything. And it's really important to go back into chemistry so people can understand what I just said. Because an apple isn't an apple, an egg isn't an egg. Nothing is what we think it is. When we look at Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, equals mc squared, the bottom line of what that really means is God lent his nature of light to make all the parts of an atom. Because that's what a quark is, a building part of an atom. It's an electromagnetic spin of light. Where'd the light come from? If it wasn't from God, you put something in an absolute darkness and matter would cease to exist. And these are things that scientists just don't ever want to touch on or deal with, but it's so obvious and staring at you in the face that you just can't ignore it. So atoms are actually electromagnetic pumps, and the orbitals, it's usually electrons, but with isotopes, it can be positrons. And the inside of the nucleus, those can be negative charges. Depends on the isotope. So that's another mind-blowing thing. How do you switch charges? And it's all because of this electromagnetics. But they don't run around in these solar system orbitals. They're more like an ice cream cone shape, like a waffle cone that's pointed and it comes out like this, and it'll stop here and skip to the other side of the nucleus and show up on the other side. And when it shares that with another atom, the electron makes a figure 8 and then skips across both the nucleuses to the other side of that. And you've just got this pump going back and forth like this. Quality nutrition it's built in such a way that all those pumps are working optimally and that electromagnetic energy that's going back and forth is proper and healthy. But when we look at poor nutrition, like a protein, you can have the same string and the same sequence of a protein in the soil, microbe that feeds off of the soil, the plant that goes up, critters that eat off the plant all the way up to us. The folding of those proteins is different in every species. And the oscillation of those folds, that electromagnetic pump, is different in every species. We have the highest frequency of oscillation. So when you eat quality proteins, they've got all these proper folds and proper oscillations. But if you eat low quality proteins, the folds are not correct and the oscillations are not correct, and you don't have the energy to build healthy, correct proteins in your own body. So we look at that whole thing with epigenetics. That's why nutrition is such a huge factor with things. Because if we feed things with high quality nutrition, everything has its chance to express in the most positive way it is. And speaking of low quality proteins, this is a very well known fact. The number one cause of brain cancer in youth is hot dogs, it's one of those things we're just talking about. Very low quality protein structures, low quality oscillations in things, and it just screws the physiology up and it manifests in brain cancer quite a bit.
What specifically do we attribute to that? The quality of the meat, the processing, combination of the two?
You look at hot dogs as scraps, that's one thing. You used to be, people say, oh, that's the scraps that fall on the floor. Maybe yeah, maybe no. But you take these poor quality things. Fat is where all of the toxicity of all animals is stored. So you got a high animal fat content, so you got a lot of toxicity in there. And then you nuke it with all of these things like nitrates to screw the proteins up, and there are other toxins and all that. And you got just this toxic bomb that's sold really cheap, subsidized through the big ag and all of the food chain issues to be really low quality. So it can't really give people what it needs. And it manifests in brain cancer in children. If people knew that going and buying their hot dogs, they probably wouldn't do it. And you look at what you do, what you spent your morning doing, you can't do that with low quality foods. You just can't. You can't be in a high competition athletic issue eating low quality foods. Tom Brady, he's one of those. He's a vegetarian, and he's one of the longest lived icons that's out there because he eats right. You look at is one of the wide receivers from the 49ers many, many years ago, Jerry Rice. His workout program was absolutely insane, and there was an open invitation for anybody to come and join him in that. Nobody could endure it.
His
It was
workouts.
just, yeah, it was just
Yeah.
totally insane. Workouts, physical activities, another aspect that controls epigenetics. Every aspect of life, your belief system controls epigenetics. Your relationships control epigenetics. How well you relate to the people in your life controls epigenetics. Every dysfunctional relationship screws it up. Every healthy relationship fixes it. You look at the whole issue of intimacy and sexuality, that in its proper context is one of the most healing things that can be entertained in a couple. But you take it out of that context, it's one of the most destructive things that you can possibly do. You look at that biblically, it's the only interaction where body, soul, and spirit unite together as one, and you give part of yourself to whoever your partner is. And that context is long-term committed covenant that makes that safe. And one night stands is something that just fractures people. So, we look at all those things. Everything in life affects epigenetics. And I think we talked about plants last time, where you give them good music, you speak to them in decent ways, they flourish. One mind blowing thing with plants is, have you ever put a Himalayan pink salt lamp next to your plants?
Yeah, we were talking about that a bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's mind blowing what that does. My wife's father was one of the top guys in a nuclear submarine. And there were three things that they used to absorb all the EMFs in the submarines so that, like, he's in the Cold War days. So all that cat and mouse games playing with the Russian subs, he was into that. all the time. There's three things they could do to totally cloak their submarine so you couldn't see it. Pink salt lamps is one of them. Running water is another. And they'd hide underneath the granite shelves up around Canada and Alaska, and they're absolutely completely invisible.
So, real quick, did they factor this into the health of the actual sailors as well?
Yeah, it's huge on what they do because the sailors in a submarine, they have to be healthier than anybody else, because they might not see daylight for months at a time. They're on really low oxygen stuff. So those people are fed with the best foods, the best environments, and they control that absolutely critically. Because if somebody gets sick, it wipes through the whole thing, and your whole crew can't function. So they're taken care of better than probably any group in the world.
So, are there any studies or research about how the Navy or whatever force would actually treat their sailors, or what they practiced, like so that they could sustain a healthy lifestyle underwater?
That's all secret stuff.
Yeah.
All those guys are sworn to absolute secrecy because those are inside things that
But potentially we're talking about negative ionization and red light therapy and extreme oxygenation of some sort and things
no,
like
no,
that.
they were extremely low oxygenation.
So how would they treat the sailors to keep them somewhat alkaline or
It's EMF issues, things along that
Mhm.
line. Water is one of the easiest ways to alkalize a body, water and vegetable intake. When you
So
look
when we
at
touched
all
on water, do we have any knowledge of what they were drinking?
it's the Navy that came up with the desalination that everybody uses for reverse osmosis.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say through reverse osmosis or so through distillation like we talked about steam distillation.
I believe what the Navy's doing is the reverse osmosis, but when you look at the nuclear issues, they easily have the ability to steam distill that
Right.
pretty quickly. But the
Yeah.
problem inside of a submarine is you're creating so much steam that there's no way to
Cool
off
it.
gas it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can't get it out of there. And then it's the moisture that bad things grow on. So that's going to make a sick environment and corrosion. You have all those things. So that's not likely to be what it is. So you're talking reverse osmosis. But the real problem years ago, where I worked with somebody had a reverse osmosis system in their house. And the water, everybody we've tested is not good. But
yeah.
we finally had somebody with a system figure out why, and it was a remineralization part. Those minerals were what was toxic.
So
So
if you eliminated the remineralization, would RO be conceivably good?
it might be, that's something we talked about with those people, and they decided to change their system instead of experiment with that.
Right.
So that would have been, my antenna was up with that one too. It's like, okay, can we fix this and make it work just by removing that? And we had talked about it, but they actually changed that system into a better one, which is
Did I ask
Aquasana.
you did I ask you how you would consume minerals personally?
For me, it's vegetables.
Yeah, just through food, through diet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mentioned that I had salt packets, salt, potassium, magnesium packets, and I would do my electrolytes that way and then take my EAAs because of how much I sweat, because of the training in the morning,
Mhm.
the working outside in the afternoons, and just like I can't stay on top of it. Even this week, I experienced some muscle cramps, and I was like, I can introduce all day and every day, and it still kind of just run through my mineral depletion. So I was wondering, in a diet, I'm a low vegetable diet personally, but how would I consume this in the safest and I guess the most organic fashion? And it would just be through diet.
I know of only two calcium magnesium supplements that are worth even considering taking. And it's not like a thing we do as a game. We go into stores and we test everybody's line of supplements in different things. And I do that on all of the professional scales with all the distributors and all that. So I've got a pretty good running issue with that. And there's just almost nobody's supplements work.
Have
And
you
that's
published results?
all my results. Everybody we work with is like a clinical trial because we don't do protocols. So I'm always testing, retesting, and constantly testing throughout everything. And when COVID hit years ago, it disrupted the supply chain. Most of the supplement industry just dropped their integrity and used lower quality parts to
Whatever
make
they could
their right, pretty much whatever they could do. And
they could build.
what used to be the best in North America became unusable within 6 months. 80 to
Speaking
90% of what we used before that, we had to change, and then those no longer can get their products to make that. So we've had to do that multiple times since COVID hit. I was highly concerned with what we used before was someday going to go out of they were going to quit manufacturing it. So we'd already had a radar up before that happened, but was assured that, oh no, that's not going to happen. But that company got sold out, and the new darling boy that took it over was looking at bottom line rather than quality, and he screwed everything up. Most of their product are unusable. It
so
was
what is
all
your I was gonna say, what is your personal salt choice then, with that said?
Himalayan pink salt's it, that's it. We tested somebody on their Celtic salt the other day. It
I
was
was gonna ask
extremely toxic, and they just
aluminum?
got a class action suit. I think it's arsenic and lead.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
did see that.
it's not good. It's
And it
really
was
not good.
it was completely highly marketed the last few years, and it got such popularity that it was hard to get for a little while, then that made it even more desirable in the marketplace, and then when some of these tests came back and it showed those results, it was disturbing and mind-boggling, but you ever gone down the Redmond's reel?
We've tested Redmonds a whole bunch of times. That stuff's toxic. It's full of heavy metals.
Yeah, so a lot of it's full of heavy metals, it seems.
Most of your evaporation ponds because of the lack of stewardship that we've done globally with the oceans. It's a phenomenal thing that we've made them toxic pits, but we have. We finally pulled it off. And you got other things in the ocean that people won't ignore, like when Japan's nuclear reactor started to melt down, and all that the ocean. There's a mass of water that's the state size of the state of Texas that's been moving around the ocean that's just radioactive. And people act like, well, that doesn't affect anything. Everything that's in that, growing in that, it affects it. It's moving all over the ocean. It keeps moving. It's not going to degrade. And what do you do with that?
So back to epigenetics, if we are factoring in these things, nutrition, workouts, relationships, beliefs, sexual activity, are we ever attributing percentages to what can kind of undo the bad? The things that we can't avoid, let's say the poor nutrition in some places where poor nutrition is the norm, or certain things in our lifestyle that obviously we're never going to escape EMFs. We're on the internet right now. We're going to be next to routers at some point in time. We're going to have our cell phones next to our heads. Is there efforts that we can take to kind of take control of epigenetics in a positive fashion?
Yeah, with your routers, your cell phones, different things like that. The cell phones is the easy thing. The farther you get it away from your body, the better off you are. Bluetooth earbuds and all that are worse than the EMFs coming off the cell phones. And you want to get brain cancer, keep it up. We had two people that got cancer from wearing their cell phones. One was under a bra strap. That's where they got cancer. Another was on their hip. That's where they got cancer. It's not a good thing. And all of those buttons and all that's really a joke. The only way you can make it so those things don't work is those cases, but you got to open the case up to use it, and there you've lost it. So the Himalayan pink salt lamps, those, if you keep put those close to your router, close to your computer, close to your cell phone, leave your cell phone away, and use wired buds to use it, you're pretty protected as far as that goes. For like smart meters and routers, another thing you can do is go down to Granite Counter Shop and get some chunks and pieces, and you just put that between your router and where you live, and where you typically are, and it shields that radiation. So you put that behind your smart meter on your house, and the smart meter radiation EMFs don't come in your house. The granite. blocks it off. In our house, our old one, we the meter was on a different house we tore down. There was a telephone pole next to that. I moved it all to telephone pole, and that was 100 feet from our house. That's really a big thing. So those are simple measures. Granite's huge. And you can go to granite shop, they've got pieces for free. Something but it does a negative ion shield around it. And it's probably the simplest, easiest way to do it. The Himalayan pink salt lamps, you need an incandescent light in it because that creates a heat and that makes the ionized.
Right.
So
So do you use grounding mats or anything to sleep, or
no, no. There's a if you put a mat underneath your sheets, that kind of makes sense. Inside of the sheets, that really doesn't because the electricity going through something like that is going to create its own EMFs. That's one thing. The other one is I've done a fair amount of farming and you got these ribbons with these little wires in them. Just the wind breaks those wires and they short circuit and you got all these kind of problems. You throw those sheets in the washer and dryer a few times. What kind of integrity you got left in those wires?
yeah, yeah,
They're just,
the grounding sheets didn't really make sense to me either. The grounding mat,
yeah.
I was kind of sold on for a little bit. And obviously, sleeping on the ground, if you could, would be one thing as well. But what about grounding shoes? What about going barefoot?
Barefoot's huge, especially in soil and grass. And concrete doesn't really make a lot of sense and some other
Blacktop now,
things.
yeah.
But, it really does make a lot of sense. And you have a lot of people promoting that. One of the big realities is we've just lost connection with this thing we call the earth out here. And people don't realize that tree huggers that the shoes are wearing come from cows and they're anti-animal issues and they don't realize their belt and their shoes come from a cow. I mean, we're so detached from the reality of the things in life. It's kind of crazy to cruise around barefoot or in moccasins. Something along that line can be a really, really a huge issue. And if you would like to do still hunting, I've done a fair amount of still hunting in my life. And we went elk hunting with one of my brothers, and you can't go with him if you don't wear moccasins. That's just one of his things. So cruising around all over the mountains in moccasins, the wax on the grass will polish those so they become really slippery, but you can walk so much quieter. And, they're just a whole different thing.
What
When
what do you do? What do you do to regrip? You like scuff them up a bit, or
you develop a lot of toe strength and a lot of technique.
actually, people are completely unaware how important it is to have strong feet, strong toes for things like combat, things like jujitsu and wrestling.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I remember one time, I grew up on the West Coast, yeah, um, Central California, and some people had found this redwood tree is pretty close by, and lightning struck it, and it made a flat top, where you could just hang out up there, and it was kind of cool. It was over 20 feet to the first branch, and it was all polished from all the traffic. I climbed that in moccasins, polished moccasins that had all the wax on the moccasins just out of technique. I used to rock climb and do all that. And it's all technique. And with what you do with wrestling with the guys and all that, it's all technique. You got to figure that out. But that issue of gripping with your toes and compressing and doing all that on a polished wood surface with polished moccasins, you'd think that's impossible. But I got up and I got down because I figured out those techniques.
Yeah, for rock climbing and stuff like that, it's for my body type, it has been absolutely brutally challenging when I would try. I'm a little heavier, so I've got good grips for stuff like wrestling and jujitsu, but when it came to holding my own body weight with fingers and would that was tough. That was tough. I had
Yeah,
a whole new respect for mountain climbers when I realized exactly how tough that was.
yeah. It's one super intense sport. Super intense, but I'll share this story with you because this one's a mind blower on epigenetic issues and whether you can actually change that. My mother, when she was 92, had diarrhea for a few days, got so wiped out she couldn't get out of bed. Neighbors were called, neighbors, a paramedic and a nurse, and his wife's a nurse, checked her out and they couldn't figure out what it was. They called an ambulance, they couldn't figure it out. So they took her into hospital and she gets a diagnosed COVID pneumonia. Could talk fine, breathe fine. You know, it's a typical thing. They put her in remdesivir and they call me up when they're transferring her to hospice, which that's where they kill people. They finish them off. I asked to talk to the nurse, took a little bit, got to talk to the nurse, and I went over the lab stuff with him, and I just want to focus on a couple things. The calcium levels were way below what they should be, and that's something we monitor very, very quickly, physiology, and if you don't take enough in, it pulls out of your bones. But it was still way below that. And I asked, "What are you doing for the calcium?" And he said, "We're giving her Tums." It's what they usually do. And I already knew that, but I'm just dialoguing. Said, "Do you guys got access to calcium citrate?" He goes, "Yeah." "Okay, can you switch her to calcium citrate, minimum of 2,400 milligrams a day, and switch her from the hospital water to distilled water? Something really benign. It's not threatening. It's not what anybody else is doing." Talked to the doctor. In a couple hours, they started that. In 2 days, she was off oxygen. 2 days later, she went home. You know what I did? Any idea what I did with that?
As far as
With the calcium and distilled water?
as far as what you did for her physically?
What those 2 things did to her physiologically inside.
Oxygen delivery,
I changed her pH,
right, brought her up to alkaline.
right? You cannot absorb, carry, transfer, or utilize oxygen in an acidic state. I made her alkaline.
And
All
no
those work.
disease can exist in an alkaline state.
And I just did that. Didn't explain it to them, and they don't know why she recovered. They thought it was what they did, but I just changed that, and that's at 92. Now, people don't realize how dramatic a change you can do by doing the right thing.
While we're touching on it, what is your number one source for calcium in a diet?
It's a multitude of things. Dark leafy greens is always really huge in that, and they got a good balance of magnesium. All your crucifers, those have a really good balance of calcium, magnesium. As far as crucifers go, things like bok choy and cabbage are actually way more nutritious than broccoli. A large part of the broccoli in the nation comes from California. It's almost all toxic, even if it's organic, just the way they grow it is. And kale became that when it became real vogue. So you're better off with the other things that people don't use, like collard greens. They're absolutely amazingly delicious. There's
And what if you're not a
more nutri
vegetable person?
What's that?
What if you're not a vegetable person? What if you're one of those that carnivore leaning, anti-veg?
You know, it's interesting. I know people in the paleo industry who were some of the biggest promoters in the world of paleo. It killed them. One of the biggest, most famous paleo people died at 57 in their second massive heart attack. I know same things happen with the keto issue. I'm working with one person who was on carnivore, couldn't give it up. It got him cancer.
Who was the famous doctor back in like the 80s? It was Atkins. Atkins, right? It was high fat.
He's
He
yeah,
died young.
and those diets are absolutely completely crazy because they can't give you the nutrition you need. You know, you think about it, I have a different approach for nutrition. I've got a different approach in everything because I build off of foundations, and you got to lay a foundation, otherwise things don't work. So when you look at nutrition, you know what the number one goal of nutrition is? The first most important thing in all nutrition, all food intake is?
As far as nutritional density, or
No, just
what's the
why you're
purpose?
eating. Yeah, what's its first purpose?
Fuel, sustenance,
It's elimination.
to get rid
Everybody
of.
wants to ignore that. Paleo, keto, and carnivore absolutely completely ignores elimination. There's no fiber in a carnivore diet, absolutely none. There's no minerals in it. There's no vitamins in it. It's nutritionally absolutely completely deficient. There's no way to make it up.
What are your thoughts
All
on raw
those
dairy?
What's that?
Raw dairy.
Oh, okay. Look at the dairy industry. When I was first started working with people, moved up into a dairy area where a lot of dairy farms were. It was pretty common for people to have 18 to 22-year-old cows in their milking line. By the time I left there, uh, there was not there's no dairy farm that has a cow that's over 3. They burn them out that quick. You
If
look
they're
at the
if they're
white
if
cell.
they're if they're doing traditional or not traditional, modern farming practices where they're milking them at the rates they are, growing them for that purpose.
Yeah,
But
anytime you got Holsteins, if you have a different kind of dairy that's got brown Swiss or Jerseys and they're
mhm,
just doing organic, you got a chance of doing something different. But here's some of the realities of dairy, and a lot of people really want to promote that a lot. The white cell count in your traditional dairy that is fueled in America right now is higher than the highest degree of an acute infection in blood levels. There's like 300,000 white cell count per whatever they're looking at. So you're actually drinking pus. It's not milk.
and the difference between raw milk and processed, boiled, homogenized, pasteurized process.
Doesn't matter.
Really?
The white cell count, you're literally, it's a pus product. And they just ignore that. Then you look at the parts in it. The protein fraction in dairy is too high. When you have too high of a protein fraction, it always makes a body acidic, which always makes you dump your minerals and makes you fairly sickly. So we've got a pus problem. We have a protein problem. With the protein, it creates a pH problem. The phosphorus count in dairy milk is opposite of what we need. So for every molecule of phosphorus that you eat, 2 calcium molecules have to accompany it through the body and out through elimination. So doing dairy with a high phosphorus count, you're actually creating a negative calcium balance. The
What's the
only
calcium
sus
count?
Huh?
What is the calcium content in dairy, in that raw dairy?
It's less than the phosphorus. So all the calcium that's in the milk has to accompany the phosphorus to get it out of the body. And it's only the only places in the world you get osteoporosis is dairy consuming cultures. It's
Well,
nowhere else in the world.
you also get the largest individuals, the tallest tribes that we know are high dairy consumers, the Hanza.
You said we get the largest what?
The tallest individuals, the tallest tribes
Interesting.
were, what's that?
Yeah, yeah, that I don't know of, but it's only those where you get osteoporosis, and then there's um, all the hormones inside of the milk are not like human hormones.
So that's
Affects
something
women.
I was going to say, that's something I'm going to need to research as well. The difference between osteoporosis in cultures that consume raw dairy versus those that consume pasteurized and homogenized dairy.
It's not going to change the calcium phosphorus fragment,
But it
but
will change the nutritional counts
what it
all
does
overall, no?
is it changes the protein
Hmm.
to a more undigestible protein once you pasteurize it. So it's more digestible, but it won't change the chemistry. So it won't flip the calcium phosphorus ratio.
Pasteurization won't change the chemistry in itself,
It changes the protein.
but not the chemistry, not the content of calcium, phosphorus,
No,
or other nutritional.
no, no, that all stays the same. So
Interest.
then we look at the hormones. The hormones are hyperinflammatory to women and women's tissues. And you start to look at all of the problems that women have with their cancer issues, PCOS, the polycystic ovarian syndrome, and all those things are all driven by poor nutrition and poor management of hormone issues like in our evaluations, we check the production of hormones into a whole bunch of different levels. And when we're looking at the sexual hormones, we test for the normal, what we make. It's called endogenously made, made inside of us. And we
Hmm.
also test exogenous, what we take in. It's pretty common for people that are eating really fairly well for their endogenous to be a 1 or a 2. 0 is perfect, 10 is as bad as it can be, and the exogenous 6, 8 to 10 from the foods that they're eating.
Right.
So the
Now,
hormones they make.
do we know a difference between standard American diet, somebody who's eating processed foods and whatever, versus somebody who's eating a whole food diet in those regards?
I test everybody on that, and when we get people more to a whole food diet, the
Yeah,
endogenous just starts falling off.
it drops. Right.
Right, and we can get all
So,
that all the way
so if
down to
somebody's
normal.
if somebody's consuming an ancestral diet, raw dairy, meats, the vegetables that would be farmed locally instead of what you'd find in the grocery store aisles, that return in comparison to those of a standard American diet, do we know what the discrepancy is and how big of a factor it
Well,
is across the board?
whenever you put dairy in there, you're always going to have the hormones that come in through the milk. Milk is made because of a hormone fraction, and it produces those female hormone fractions in there. So, regardless of whether that's pasteurized or not pasteurized, it's still going to be an issue. Those hormones will be a bit healthier in grass fed
Hmm.
with no grain. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
As
grass
long
fed,
as
grass
there's
finished, pasture raised, right?
right, but if you start giving the atrazine Roundup fed corn products that everybody does, that really turns those upside down. Atrazine destroys ability for males to make testosterone. Something along that line also. That's I can see the herb right now.
Glyphosate?
No, no, it's an herb that women use a lot. It's got a purple flower on it. I can't remember what it is right now. I'll probably get in in a little bit. Anyway, the hormone fraction will always be upside down and not what we produce. You look at the hormones that the pharmaceutical industry gives for women; those all come from horse sources, and those are way more toxic than a woman can make, and it doesn't nurture their tissues. It's hyperinflammatory to their tissues. Dairy will be the same issue. They'll be a lot worse if it's fed with the corn and especially the toxic corn and all that other stuff than it is with grass fed, but still not healthy, even grass fed. And the last thing with the dairy is it's got casomorphine in it. And the morphine compound is what gives the satiety, that addictive quality to it. And that's in all mammal milk is one of the issues that was designed to make infants, the young nursing child, whether that's human or a whale or whatever it is, so they content and they want to suck as far as that goes. So there's a whole bunch of things in it that mess people up.
Yeah, so I would really like to see the study between something like a Jersey cows that's pasture raised and is grass fed, grass finished, whatever, versus the standard milk on the shelf, and we see what the actual differences are. If there is a movement, and you can definitely see that there is a movement to remove the restrictions from raw milk, and there has to be a reasoning for it. Spoke to so many different people who are just foundationally believers in raw milk and dairy as long as it's produced in the way that it was intended to be produced by nature and as it was utilized ancestrally.
Yeah,
Me
it's
myself,
it's it's much better product for sure, but it still has those inherent product problems with it, even when it's
when we look at other cultures that are high dairy consumers and they have much better longevity than us, are we just attributing it to all the other things that we're polluting ourselves with then?
it's when you look at health, longevity, and all that, it's a global view. And whenever you do biological research, this is a real interesting thing in that if you approach any kind of research with a bias,
Hmm.
there's no honesty in it, and it's just a manipulation of fact. But another issue with biological research, we are such complex, interactive mechanisms. You can't isolate one thing. There's just absolutely no way you can isolate one factor and go, okay, we're just going to study this. You got to understand all the physiological interactions that are around that whole thing to be able to look at all of that. And that's the reason why we are so successful in helping people recover from the impossible is I've got a really deep, deep, deep knowledge on physiology. And you listen to the way I'm talking around all that physiology. And no matter what subject we're talking about, because there's so many things that come into play with that that a lot of people aren't addressing.
So we're debunking blue zones almost immediately, right? Because then
Well,
we can't analyze all the blue zones and the commonalities without breaking it down to those individual things. And it's very hard to account for things that we just can't account for, that we're not studying when we look at their longevity.
the interesting thing, as far as the debunking issue, the fast food industry has infiltrated those places. And the youth don't want to follow those traditional ways, and they're blimping out, being obese, and get diabetes the same rate we are over here. You take people from those traditional cultures that are isolated like that, you bring them over here to assume our kind of a diet, and in a very short period of time, they have the same disease rate with the same problems that we do. If they return back to their original cultural diet, that goes away. I remember this one story years ago where an American doctor was working over in Africa. Somebody came in with this gut wrenching pain and he says, I'm going to open him up and do an appendectomy. And the local doctors said, don't do that. You'll be the laughing stock. They'll railroad you out of here. We don't get appendicitis here. And the American doctor said, I'm going to give it X amount of hours. And if he doesn't recover, I'm opening up. I'm taking out his appendix. He didn't recover in those amount of hours. He opened it up, big, huge inflamed appendix ready to burst. He cuts it out and they go, what happened? How did this happen? Because this doesn't happen in our culture. The guy that was there had spent 6 months in the big city, eating the big city diet. It screwed everything up inside of his gut. So, we see all kinds of different incidences like that. The people we work with, we get them off what their standard American diet is, get them on a healthy diet, and everything just completely changes. It's a Could write a book on story after story after story of just that aspect alone. But
Would
you
you,
have the
I was going to say, would you say your treatment and philosophy then aligns with like Dr. Sebi?
I'm not sure who that is.
He was a herbalist, a naturalist, and all the conspiracy theorists in the world think he was taken out in silence for the reasons that he was healing diseases. What, as far as epigenetics, can we overcome in the standard American diet? And how come these people from blue zones that spend time here are overwhelmed, even though the rest of their lifestyle may be aligned with better health in the first place? Is it just that poisonous?
Our food supply is poisoned by design. There's no doubt about it. When you get into the history of everything, big ag is tied into big pharma. Congress subsidizes all that because they can do insider trading and make a ton of money with all of that. The ag subsidies, I think RFKJ says that like 73% of our crops are subsidized. All those go to the junk food. Almost all that goes to the junk food that's sold at a cheaper rate than people can buy really good food for and keep that sick. Toxins that are introduced into our food supply, our water supply, everything is absolutely totally insane. Our environments have just become ridiculous as far as that goes. And you've got all these industries that all interact and work together to keep it that way for profit. It's sick. It's
And yet
completely
And yet we're promoting the idea that we've got it all figured out here in the West and that our healthcare is head and shoulders above the rest of the world and our nutrition is head and shoulders above third world. And we're most likely completely backwards.
Our healthcare, though it's state of the art, we have one of the sickest societies in the world with the highest healthcare costs in the world. You look at our education, last time I looked at it, we homeschooled was like 20 years ago. We were in the 50s as far as quality of education that goes on out there. We have all these things that mess our society up there by design for profit. And we have all kinds of people in control that they keep that control by padding the people who make the rules pockets. And
All right, before I forget, what do you think about calcium supplementation?
it's critical. You can't get enough through your food. So it's really, really a critical issue.
And do you have the CalMag that you would actually refer people to off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's a vital product.
Vital Product.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the name of the brand, Vital Product?
No, Vital's the name of it. It's not a commonly used one. You can get that off my website because you can't get it in a store. It's professional supply. The only way you can get it is through somebody who carries it, but it's the best one that's out there.
Are there any other vitamins and supplements companies that you believe in or distributors that you believe in?
I'm different as far as that goes. If you look at what I carry, I got 1, 2, maybe 3 products from one company, couple from another, couple from another. All I care about is what works. As I said earlier, the best companies in North America have reduced their quality because it all came in with the disruption of supply chain with COVID, and it destroyed the supplement industry. So 80, closer to 90% of what we used to use before COVID hit, had to throw it all away. And I've had to find new product to replace that 3 to 5 times since that, because somebody will step up to the plate and then they can't get their supply and they quit making it. So 2 multivitamins in North America that have any value. All these things, I've probably tested hundreds of supplements in all these different classes over the years. And you look at all the women's vitamins that you see in health food stores, we've never found one that works. Not one, ever. Men's are pretty much the same thing. The fish oil supplements, the 75% of those are rancid before you buy them. There's 2 sources of that work in North America that we found, and I'm sure we've tested hundreds. There's only 2 sources of flora that work that we've tested, and it's on and on and on down the line. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous what goes on. And I've talked to the supplement industry. I've had close friends that are upper management, vice presidents, through every level of manufacturing, distributing, and their sales reps. Nobody cares. Some of the reps that I've talked to, they get out a piece of paper and a pen and they write notes. In the different distributors and companies that I use, I'm one in like 300,000 docs. I'm the only one anybody knows in those that can take a supplement. I can test it. I can find what the problem is with it, identify the specific issue with that, how to fix it, what the
It
source
won't work.
was. And the people that know me that I've interacted with over the years, when they talk to me, they just pull out a piece of paper so they can send this to everybody they know because I'm doing things no one else does.
But they won't fix it in their products. Vitamin C, real quick before we get run out of time again. Lipomosul, or any suggestions on vitamin C if people want to take that?
That's a different one, difficult one too. I only
Yeah.
know of one source of vitamin C that's clean enough to take. That's on my website too. I mean, it's that bad.
How did they make that one? It's not the
Well, the problem with vitamin C, almost all vitamin C, they take our toxic corns full of atrazine Roundup, ship it over to China. They ferment it over there in China, and then China removes the corn proteins and says it's corn free, and they send that back, and that's in your all of your medical supplies, your nutritional supplies, and everything else. It's really, really, really tough to find something that's actually clean, that's not full of atrazine and Roundup. And I know of one, only one.
What's the delivery system?
It's a powder.
And this is on your website as well. So you heard it here. You need to go to this website and take a look. Take a look.
So, it's sick. From my standpoint, I see all this stuff. I've been talking about it. I've been concerned about it. I've been interacting. I got asked a few years ago to develop a supplement line for a startup company for Lyme disease. And the people are just dishonest. They want to give me 5%. I told them, I got this who I am. This is what I can do. I've already got a whole bunch of things figured out as far as that goes. And you want to work with somebody like me, we could turn your company into $100 million company in a short period of time because no one else has the tools to make this kind of quality and make things work. I don't know how
And
to tweak it.
was it too expensive?
They said they'd give me 5%. Just go jump in a lake. Forget it.
Right. So have you thought
I
about doing it
mean,
yourself?
I have, but I don't have a big enough social media following to do that. If I had a big social media following, it'd be really easy to jump on board and I could do that.
I was going to say perhaps it's more about coming up with a product and then the social media will follow the product.
No, I've already got the products. I've developed a bunch of them that work better than anything else. Like we've got a tincture that we use for women's hormones to normalize those. Most of the products that are tinctures like that, you do 1 to 3 dropperfuls, oftentimes multiple times a day. Ours are so strong, it's 3 to 4 drops, and it's phenomenal what it does. We tweaked that and made one for men that's man, it's so much better than anything that I've tried, and I've tried a lot of different things out there. It just doesn't work. I've got a whole line of supplements already got the formulas for Lyme disease, candida, parasitic issues. Wouldn't take hardly anything to develop other stuff. I just need some people that if I could partner with somebody who's a good marketer and got a really big following, we could pull it off and it'd be really easy.
All right. So since we are aligned on first and foremost the terrain, the body itself and the conditions of it, what is your thoughts on the pleomorphic cycle and the parasites? Since you touched on that just now, are parasites something that are opportunistic and are potentially cleaning up our environment for us, or are they something that we need to eliminate?
When you look at everything that invades us, it's all opportunistic. And it's allowed to come in because something doesn't work right. You look at our protection issues. Almost everybody's got an H. pylori infection, which lowers the stomach acid. With lower stomach acid, bacteria come through, virus come through, parasites come through. The stomach acid that should kill all that stuff. So there's one of your opportunities right there. Then we talked last time about the atrophy of the gut lining with the pathogens growing inside of it. That makes it toxic. It's a prime opportunity for any parasites to come in and take hold and do whatever they want. So everything that comes in that disturbs our flora or tries to grow inside of us that shouldn't be there is opportunistic. And
And
there's no
do you
no
focus on
reason.
elimination of those?
It's interesting. I was just talking to somebody recently about that. The things that I use to eliminate parasites and antimicrobials and that, they won't work unless you do all the foundational stuff first. People are thinking these are magic bullets. They're not. You've got to put this whole package together to do it. And very few people even understand that, have the tools to assess it, or the mind to put it all together. Once you put it together, it's like planning meals. If you look at your nutrition, first and foremost, to eliminate, so you can get rid of all your toxic byproducts and all that, going to be way, way, way healthier. And it's going to force you to eat in a way that's going to be healthy.
So foundationally, you want to get healthy and get your system working before you even think about wormwoods and the seeds and the different processes we would go through to eliminate anything.
Yeah, if you're not eliminating properly, those things become toxic bombs and make you worse. And you can't dose somebody who's not eliminating properly. It's just too toxic. And here's an allegory for you with that. If you take and say you got a wife and 3 kids at home and you're making soup. You're making a gallon and a half of soup. That's going to probably take at least 3 tablespoons of salt to make that right. So salt's like your antimicrobials or your antiparasitic. If you take that same amount of salt and put that in a saucepan for 2 cups worth that you're going to heat up for lunch, could you eat it?
Very salty.
Yeah, you couldn't eat it. You'd puke. You'd literally throw it up. And when you take something strong enough to deal with these microbes inside of you, it does the same thing. It just creates this toxic ball in there. And it'll give you explosive diarrhea, churn your gut up quite a bit, make you puke, it'll make you do all kinds of things. You can't do it unless you lay the foundation. It can take weeks to get somebody up to the point where they actually can take therapeutic doses.
Understood.
And that's not rocket science. It's just simple, practical, functional.
I mean, I hear people talking all the time about binders and the importance of doing them the right ways. Yeah.
No purpose of binders at all. The whole issue of binders is in the biggest issue is people in the mold space.
Hmm.
And a binder doesn't do anything to get anything out of your blood. Nothing. And if you have the proper elimination, no one should ever accept less than 2 bowel movements a day.
What
3
if
to 5 is normal.
what if they're intermittent fasters and their window is really condensed?
When you play games with your diet, it screws up the gut lining and the gut flora and does all kinds of other issues. Even an intermittent faster, I've fasted a lot for decades. One year I literally fasted a third of a year. I think I did 3 40-day fasts and at least once a week, sometimes more than that. One year was nuts. It was just nuts. Understand fasting, I do it more for religious reasons than health reasons, but even still, you have to have this at the end of whatever your cycle is. That has to still be balanced nutrition. Whether you're eating three meals a day or you're doing intermittent fasting with weird intervals, if you fast for several days, you got to make up that nutrition at the end of that time. And those are the critical issues.
I guess my question was more if you're on the 18th as far as hour protocol and you kind of stick to that normally, then one bowel movement per day would kind of be the norm, wouldn't it?
Okay. If you're looking at 1 bowel movement a day, a normal stool, so they say, is 1.5 to 2 fingers in width and 6 to 9 inches in length. So if you're having 1 bowel movement of 18 inches,
Yeah, double that or whatever.
you're in that ballpark. But
Not to be too personal, but this has been my lifestyle for so long that's always been normal to me. And trust me, if I didn't need to go to the restroom in the morning, I would feel like there was something wrong.
right, right. Yeah, my own personal is, I average 3 to 5 feet of stool a day.
Yeah, you eat more meals.
Um,
Do you do
I eat a
breakfast,
lot of
lunch, and dinner?
vegetables. What's
Do
that?
you do breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Most days. Not always, but most days. Intermittent fasting, I'll skip 1 or 2 of those. It depends on what goes on and what I've been doing.
I don't do breakfast. I haven't done breakfast for 20 something years.
Physiologically, that's really the best meal of the day, and you burn the calories you eat, and you use all that up in the day when you eat breakfast. You store things when you eat at night.
What if you're really going? I mean, I guess I understand what you're saying, like if you're eating before you go to sleep, but if you're going through like my traditional day would be go work out for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and like obviously hand-to-hand combat and the sweat dump and the amount of energy that you're working for that first meal is crazy. And then I will go and work, or even if I do something like this for an hour or two, most of my work is going to be more activity outside or good movement around. Then I'll train again and then eat again with those
Right.
kind of
So
energy
so
demands.
what you're doing is you load yourself with calories that you store. You can only retain between 30-45 minutes of energy that's available until you start to convert your stores so that you can work out. So every day you're tapping into those stores and you're burning them up. But if you didn't have a lifestyle you had, it's very easy to blimp out. It's a odd thing that you can starve yourself, but because the way you eat, it changes your hormones, and that'll make you gain fat because of the hormone shift, not because the calories are adequate. And generally, what it does, it makes you melt your muscles. That converts into sugar in the liver so you can defend life threatening situations. And then that starts as the blood sugar rises, insulin drives it into tissues and you make fat. And that's how you develop cholesterol. But your lifestyle, you're burning that store up,
Yeah,
whatever you stored at
I had
night.
a hormone optimization guy on who swore by treating meals as if they're not fuel for your next workout, but your workout comes before your meals so that your synthesis is better. And the way he described it was as if we were cavemen, we would hunt, 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 eat. So we needed that exercise before our meal.
Yeah. But physiologically, that's backwards because when the blood sugars drop, adrenaline cortisol levels rise. That liberates amino acids from your proteins, mostly your muscles. That converts into sugar in your liver, gluconeogenesis, and your sugar levels rise to defend those life threatening situations, which is trying to push yourself beyond your nutritional stores. And
Would
that's
we view this Yeah, would we view this any differently if we were hunter gatherers and we were almost in
no,
a fight or flight
no,
state
no.
most
This
of our
this is just the way your physiology works. Your adrenals, they make pregnenolone, DHEA, which are precursors to your sexual hormones. And
Mhm.
those sexual hormones get converted in peripheral tissues, mostly gonads secondarily, and both men and women. The conversion pregnenolone, DHEA to progesterone.
Mhm.
Progesterone converts into testosterone. Testosterone converts into estrogen. Both men and women, just different percentages that go that way. When you raise cortisol or adrenaline levels because of stresses like what this guy is talking about, it steals all the pregnenolone DHA to make adrenaline and cortisol. And all that goes to try and decrease inflammation and raise blood sugar. It's the adrenals that control your blood sugar. The insulin coming off the pancreas is only to take what's in excess and drive it into the tissues.
And is our melatonin production affected by this at all or by a lifestyle change? Let's say we were eating before we go to sleep.
Everything interacts. Melatonin's coming out of your pineal gland, and nutrition affects that, and your exposure to light affects that.
For sure.
So those
So
are
if you're
things.
so if your I guess what I was going to touch on is if your circadian rhythm is balanced. In other words, you're up and you're getting early morning sunshine every day, and you're going to sleep after the sun goes down at the same time every day. Would we be less affected by whether or not we are doing that meal before sleep?
The the whole issue of as soon as you deplete your energy stores, what's in your liver, what's in your muscles, as soon as you deplete those, doesn't matter what else you're doing, the cortisol and adrenaline levels start to rise up to give you sugar to be able to do things. And it takes a while to convert into the ketotic state to be able to burn your fats. That's when you get your second wind and all that. And as that's happening, you're also, the adrenaline cortisol levels are going up. So it's not a way to get around it as far as that goes. We have all these people with ideas that don't look at physiology. And the idea,
It's just less problematic if we're actually living that lifestyle every day, then pretty much.
yeah, you get your body accustomed to it. And with like what you do, the explosive workouts and throwing people around and getting thrown around and all that, that's a very stressful issue,
Mhm.
and then that's going to be something that there's a lot of things we can do to become an adrenaline junkie.
All right. So, one of the most fundamental practices with this sport, with a very physical, very competitive sport, is for the first few years, you do have that high cortisol level. You do have the high adrenaline level. You notice it all the time. And then you become, if you're proficient and you can breathe properly, which that's a big part of it, is teaching yourself to breathe,
Hmm.
Buteyko breath through the nose, being able to be calm and composed, and then use the explosive speed and power only when necessary. You can actually enter a different state of training to where it's, yes, it's very intense, it's very rigorous, it's very consuming, it is energy consuming, but you're literally operating on fractions of what you were at one point in time. That's just the way it would go,
Yeah,
or
there's
it should
all
go.
kinds of very interesting things that we can do with our physiology. It's called acclimation, and you get used to stuff that allows us to do all kinds of things that would seem to be impossible in other situations. So you're adding another factor in there
They're
with that,
adaptations.
right? Basically.
So I guess my next point would have been, then once you have these adaptations in your body, some stressful event comes to into your life, or you stop pushing yourself quite as much, and then all of a sudden these other things can catch up to you and you do start putting on the weight. You do start
It's
having
right.
physiological changes,
Yeah, with what you're doing, your exercise is your normalizing factor to deal with all these hormonal changes and all these storage changes. But if you kept everything up and you drop that exercise down, you'll start to notice some big changes that are primarily driven by all the hormone dysfunctions because you're no longer doing that normalizing factor.
which would bring up a conversation as to why so many middle-aged combatants, jujitsu wrestlers, judo practitioners are all on the testosterone replacement therapy.
Yeah, no one should ever replace hormones. It's
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah.
It's absolutely nuts. It screws you up so you cannot regulate anymore. And one of the biggest issues with that is, you look at the steroid issues, the testicular and genital atrophy in that stuff is it's not something a man would ever want to have happen if he knew that was the result.
Yeah.
They get a short shot of feeling a little bit better, but it's a false way to do it. You can normalize those things by doing other things that are healthier.
Ice baths and all kinds of other things. There are definitely hacks that
You
have been
know,
proven.
that's one of them, but you just change your lifestyle to healthy. In the blue zones, do you know what the sexual activity is of the 90-year-olds?
Of the 90? Oh, yeah, they're active, right? They're still healthy.
Yeah, they're what 30-year-olds are over here.
Yeah, they say, I like that saying, the healthier you are, the hornier you are. It's really sad where we're at in the United States, because the age at which men do not feel the same in that regard is lower and lower and lower.
Right, and that's all a lifestyle issue, and you can't fix that by throwing toxic hormones at it, so
Well, I've kept you again over our time, and we're gonna have to do a part 3.
yeah,
But, once again, your website,
it's, healthforyou.
and I'll put it in the show notes because it's a U, not a IOU,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and that
the
landing page
supplement.
with the epigenetic book on it is getmewell.net. That's a lot easier, and that'll take you right to the website.
Getmewell.net.
Yeah, that's really easy to remember. That'll
Yeah,
get you that epigenetic book on how to manipulate your genetics so you can change your destiny, change your life. And that's got all my links to it.
awesome. Unfortunately, I had not checked out the supplements for some reason, and I'll be on there right after this show to go do my research on that, and I'll
Yeah.
get you back on here again for another episode because we got more to talk about. And I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining me again and overstaying our.
Thanks for the invite. This is good.
I appreciate you, doctor. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.